everybody, and welcome to the 3 p.m. edition of the Maurice Brown Show. Welcome to the show, a comedian that appeared in his own episode of the award-winning Bananas Comedy Show, which features the nation's top clean comedians. He also was featured on CMT's 20 Greatest Redneck Moments. You gotta see it. And was a writer and performer on the Henry Cho comedy show on Great American Country. He delivers stand-up for any group seeking 100% clean comedy. He also teaches comedy writing workshops across the country and online through his School of Laughs. You may have heard it. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show the very funny and talented Rik Roberts. Hello, Rik. How are you?
Hey, it sounds like I know that guy, maybe. We have a lot in common with that guy you were talking about.
I think you might have a lot in common there, Rik. I tell you, man. Thanks for being on the show, man. I tell you, I was saying before we came on live that I've been following you for a few years, and we've communicated from time to time. Uh, so glad to have you on the show, man. You have a great reputation. A lot of comics know who you are and have been through the School of Laughs. I remember, Rik, in 2016, through the School of Laughs, I found out about a clean comedy conference in San Diego where I met a lot. And I went there based on your School of Laughs podcast. And dude, I met so many cool, clean comics out there. Maria Herman, Char Prunier, better known as Charlene May, um, Jimmy Brogan. I mean, Eddie Brill. I mean, it was just awesome, man. Are you still facilitating, or are they still doing that kind of thing out there in San Diego?
You know, there was two groups that year, the Clean Comedy Conference and there was the Clean Comedy Challenge. I think you're talking about the conference.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if they put that on. You know, last year everything was on hold, so I'm not sure what's going to reboot
Well, yeah.
here in 2021. But I do think I saw where the Clean Comedy Challenge is planning on doing something this summer. So that one's up and going. But I think all those conferences are great so people can get a chance to, you know, meet, like you just said, meet other comics is huge because I wouldn't say it's a lonely road always being a comedian, but the more comics you know that kind of have a like mind as far as the approach of doing clean comedy, the better. That way you've got people you can kind of call up when you need some ideas or some punchlines, or you just want to kind of find out what the temperature is out there for corporate events or people that are booking clean comedy. So those conferences are great. So, you know, if you never had a meeting and you just went around and had lunch and supper and breakfast with those folks, that to me is always worth the price of admission. But of course, you got great sessions in there, people teaching about writing, people that have TV experience and tell you what it takes to get on those shows. So I'm always a big fan of those. Anything that contributes to clean comedy, 100% on board with it.
Yeah, you mentioned COVID-19. This pandemic has slowed everybody down. My wife did share some really good news with me, though, Rik, during the pandemic. Get this, Rik, you're not going to believe it. She said, honey, we have enough money for the rest of our lives.
The bad news is
we have to die tonight.
Right.
Yeah. By midnight, as a matter of fact. And we'll be fine, Rik. No, it's not that bad, dude. But this pandemic has really gotten in our way as comics. And, you know, what have you been doing to supplement the inability to perform on stage, Rik, during this time?
Well, you know, it was a tricky year for sure. Early on, I just kind of took a breath and hit pause. And like everybody else, I thought this thing would blow over in a month or two. And by the third month, I'm like, oh, we got to go eat some food. How are we going to make some dollars here?
Yeah.
But, you know, I was very blessed where I had an outstanding royalty payment that was due to me for some recordings I'd done over the past 10 years that somebody was cashing in on without, paying the licensing fee. And my publisher found out about that. And so God really stepped in about the third month of this pandemic, right when I started kind of getting concerned.
Yeah.
And this royalty collection came in that pretty much was equal to a year's income. So it's
wow.
finished. That allowed me to stop focusing on what I needed, and I started putting together classes for people that were homebound and couldn't go do things, and started trying to find out ways to serve other people. But that was a big blessing. Outside of that, the income streams I teach classes online and do that, and I do coaching and mentoring for some folks. And then corporations, companies, all their employees were kind of strewn about working from home. And
Yeah.
I started thinking of programs I could do for them, even though it couldn't be live at a conference. I started putting things together like virtual talent shows and producing content for their online conferences. And I'll probably continue to do that because some groups won't be back in office for a while. And then others have seen the value of not spending a ton of money having these huge conferences when they can get it all done in 3 days and people can sleep in their own bed. So it gave me time to learn about other options as far as bringing in money, but also gave me time to get healthy. The road can run you pretty ragged, and I was pretty worn out. So started riding a bicycle. As silly as that sounds as an adult, I'm probably in the best shape I've ever been in thanks to this pandemic. So
Wow.
there's always a bright side. Now there's plenty of dark days and days of frustration, but always try to look for the positive.
So I guess you have a home gym that you're able to use?
Yeah, I've got a thing, like I say, with my bicycle, I can ride it out. We've got a greenway that's not too far from us, so I can hop on there and go out for hours at a time. I've also got a little, I forget what you call it. It's a fluid trainer. So if it's rainy outside or cold like it was this winter, I can throw the bike on there and exercise. But yeah, I've got all the resistance bands and all those kinds of things too. And, people forget you can go old school, do push-ups, chin-ups, sit-ups, and get in pretty good shape too.
Well, you're right. I mean, why not go? Oftentimes, old school is usually the best road. But
It is. That's
but
why it's
that
been around for so long.
exactly, exactly. But as you mentioned Zoom, I don't think this is going anywhere, Rick. I think especially when you think about the federal government, because they have a lot of people that are working from home, and I've heard talk that they may just continue to do that once we get back to normal. Those folks may continue to work permanently from home.
Yeah,
So
I think that's going to be around for a while, as well as what they call these hybrid events. I've got some bookings come up in the next few months where I'll be live, but they'll also be sending it to people who are at home. So they call them
yeah,
hybrid. And if you're equipped to do those shows and you can think in terms of entertaining the people at home as well as the people in front of you, there's a lot of opportunities, straight ahead. So whether it's from your own house like we're doing today, or if you're on stage somewhere and they've got the camera set up, plenty of different ways to reach people, which I think, I obviously would rather be in a room full of people with people. That's kind of who I am. But if you can
yeah.
still get a message across or be inspirational or bring some laughs to a group remotely in this kind of time when people need it, however we get it done works for me.
Well, I think that what's going to happen, and I've told a lot of comedians this, and we have to get used to what's happening right now because I don't think it's going to go anywhere once we go back to the stage, which we will. We'll be live again in front of packed houses. But this platform is coming with us. You know what I mean? And I think that it would behoove a lot of comics, in particular, in regards to what we do, is to get, like I said, ahead of this and start learning how to swim in these new waters because a lot of people are, a lot of businesses, a lot of corporations, they're saving time, money on travel and lodging and food. But my bedroom's right across the hall. I'm in a studio and I've met comics from Turkey, Canada, the UK. I've done collaborations with comics that I never would have met before. So this is going into back to the normal. Whenever that returns, this is going to be a part of it. And I think it's pretty cool. The only problem, Rick, first of all, have you done any Zoom comedy shows?
Yeah, early on, I think I was like a lot of comics where I'm like, you can't be funny on the internet and you can't do comedy on Zoom. I even turned down, I probably turned down 12 shows before I started thinking, well, I'm fairly creative. I've been doing this for 30 years. Maybe I can find a way to be funny over the internet. And finally just said, oh, yeah, it's whatever works on TV or doing a TV interview, which is basically what we're doing here, which is another
Yeah.
reason why comics need to learn how to do this.
Yeah.
We'll work in a Zoom call. So instead of talking to 300 people and turning them into one audience like you do in a theater or a comedy club, it's a little different on Zoom, but there's things you can do on Zoom that you can't do in a regular comedy club. Like, for example, my favorite thing when I get on a Zoom call, I tell them all to be unmuted and all to be have their video on. Originally, I told them turn your audio off because everybody's got dogs barking. But I was worried about how I was going to get through the call. I wasn't thinking about how they were going to get through it. So I started saying, hey, unless you've got a kid that's screaming, and then I would put somebody else in charge of monitoring that, a co-host. I leave everything wide open so I can see you. And then what that allows is everybody else on the call can see into the homes or the offices of everybody else. And in a comedy club, I'm the only person that can see the faces of the 300 people in the crowd or whatever. But on a Zoom call, we can all see the exact same thing. So that gives you the opportunity to kind of start looking in people's backgrounds, talking about that trophy or that elk's head or whatever else is going on. And there's a lot of jokes you can come up with that you couldn't do anywhere else. And so there's different things that become available to you with the Zoom calls. And I did quite a few after that first 3 months went by. I started taking them all and just learning as I went. I eventually upgraded to a better camera and lighting setup so that when I did them, I wasn't just kind of blending in with the crowd. Hopefully I had better lighting and sound than most of them. And then companies see that you've invested in it and they reward you for that and they hire you back and pass your name along. So yeah, I was totally against it up front, but like you said, moving forward, it's going to be part of what we're doing and I'm having fun with it. There's just a ton of things you can do that you couldn't do before.
Well, you're actually learning how to do comedy in a different way. It affects the performer way more than the audience because, like you said, we're used to seeing faces. We base our rhythm and pace on what we're seeing in the crowd. Well, sometimes you can do a virtual show, and if you just talk to a camera, it could be like, 100 people watching you or 1,000, whatever. You can't see anybody. You just talk to the camera. So you don't know if you're bombing or not. And
Right.
so you just don't know. And more often than not, the report is you killed. Like people seem to love it. So you just have to trust your instincts that you're doing well and just stay with it. It's very difficult because, again, you feel like you're bombing, but just do your stuff, keep doing your stuff with everything you've got. And then if you can see the faces, then there's that 3 to 4 second delay. Like you serve up the punch and then you have to wait for it. And then you go, okay, now that's good. Now, and because we got to have that appreciation. They got to show us the love so we can keep our rhythm going, Rik. That's what we feed on that.
Yeah,
So,
that's exactly it. The whole transition was getting out of the head of, how are these people going to make me feel good and switching it over, how can I help them feel good about it? And a lot of it is sacrificing a little bit of the control. I mean, you have a lot less control over a online situation, obviously. But again, that's just you and your control issues. It's not necessarily the crowd thinking that you're not doing a great show. You just got to get out of your own head. So, one thing I've learned with the Zoom shows is, every 10 to 15 minutes, if I'm doing an hour Zoom show, which I try to get them to book 30 minutes or less for a Zoom
yeah.
call. I just tell them that's more than you would get watching a sitcom because a sitcom is only 22 minutes if you take out the commercials. So 30 minutes, especially with this Zoom fatigue. But, every 5 or 10 minutes, pop in the chat box and ask them a question so you can do some crowd work, some interaction, and engage them that way. I didn't think about that at all the first 4 or 5 months I was doing Zoom calls. I stayed out of the chat room, so I was just trying to stay on track and remember my jokes. But when I slowed down and started involving the crowd, asking some questions, then you can get an answer from one person. And, oh, so Molly here says that, she's been married for 55 years. Molly, where are you at? Raise your hand. And then you do crowd work just like you would normally do in a show. But you just have to learn these things as you go. A lot of stuff I had, resistance against early on. I kind of embraced as things got moving. So it's just like you said, it's a learning change, learning transition. But if you're open to it, good things can happen.
Yeah. Robin O'Brien says that she loved you on the Huckabee show, which I had a chance to see that as well, and you did a great job on there. Speaking of the Huckabee show, so is he still is that actually still going on where he has comics on as guests?
Yeah, when the pandemic hit, probably for 2 months we were shut down and we weren't doing anything live in studio. So, he had limited interaction with performers. Although he did have a couple of, Joe Castillo. I don't know if you've ever seen Joe Castillo. He's a sand art artist. He had him on where he was set up perfectly. He had a GoPro above what he was doing, and he did exactly what he'd do in a corporate event, but it was made for TV. So he had a few guests on like that, but I think it was from August on, we were able to have limited seating of 50 people in the audience ever since. And then so the comics that were close by or that were willing to travel were still booked on the show. And I did my set 2 weekends ago, and I was almost hesitant to do it because I thought, well, there's only gonna be 50 people in the audience, so I won't get the big laughs like I'm used to. But then I started thinking, that's just me again. The 50 that showed up, they want to be entertained, so let's do a show for those 50. And we had a great time. It was a fun set. Tricky to do a set, a TV set these days because you don't have as many live opportunities to go out and try out the material. So there was 2 minutes of that 4.5 minute set that I had written the week before. Once I got the call and said, "Hey, you want to do the show?" I said, "Yeah." And so I took some material that I'd been working on that kind of had been smoothed out, or I wouldn't say perfected, but I was comfortable with. And then I added a couple minutes that I didn't know how it was going to sound until I said it in front of a live audience. And I got pretty lucky with most of that. So he's, back. He loves comedy. I have a lot of comedian friends who aren't conservative. They might be Christian, but they're not right wingers. And I just tell him he doesn't care about any of that. He actually loves to hear a different point of view and invites people on the show that have a different point of view. He's got his, but he loves to entertain people and have people entertain us that have a different point of view that can maybe convince us of things. But the show, when you're on there, he just wants you to be funny and have a good time. And he's a great host. So I would say any comics that are reluctant to get on a show like that, like Bill Maher, he's not my favorite guy. But if I got invited to go do the show and be panel on that show, I would go and be funny and show them that, hey, Christians can be a pretty good comedian and pretty good voice out there on current events.
Well,
So,
well,
he's back to
you
full
would
swing ahead with the comics on the show. We're having a good time with it. I think we've done 181 shows now, so he knows what's going down.
well, if Bill Maher invited you, you would have to go, Rick, because he's got to get saved, dude. Bill Maher's got to get saved quick. But anyway, yeah, but he does actually. But that being said, Rick, honestly, we need people packed in. What we do is antithetical to the pandemic's environment that it creates for a comedian. Spaced out, the mouth's covered, so I really can't hear you laughing now. And it's just difficult, and we're going uphill in a live setting based on the protocol that's been set forth. We need them packed in. Now, I do think it's going to make us better comedians once we come out of this, because we're trying to, even the Zoom stuff, you have to adjust and anticipate all these different things that are happening. I actually think all of us are going to end up being better comics once we get back to normal.
Yeah, I think about this often. I think I'll definitely be a more appreciative comedian after every single show, even a bad show. I'll be happy that I got to do it live with other people in the room and have a real experience in the same place at the same time. Even I haven't flown during the pandemic. I'm waiting until I get my vaccinations. That's the one kind of line I drew in the sand as far as what I would and wouldn't do. So, even that first time I go through TSA or the first time there's a flight delay, I'll be like, oh, great. I get to go somewhere, but I'm delayed. I don't care. I get to go somewhere, So at the very least, I think I'll appreciate every show better and hopefully be better at performing. It'd be interesting to see as things get moving how the year, I wouldn't say it was a year off because I've still performed quite a bit, but how the different types of performances might play in a bigger live setting. Because I've done plenty of live shows, but the most people in a live show maybe been 100 people sitting in a 6,000 seat area. So still waiting to see how that all shakes out with the bigger groups, but I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully we'll be better for it.
Rick, can you tell us exactly how you accidentally pulled over a cop?
Yeah, so for those that don't know, I've got a comedy piece where I'm driving across Kansas and I accidentally pull over a cop. At least that's what the piece is called. You can find that on YouTube, on Drybar, or my website.
Yeah.
Pull over a cop or Fife in Kansas. It's got a few different names out there. But the origination of that joke, I was working in Omaha, Nebraska at the Funny Bone. It was my first time there. And, I got there just maybe an hour and a half before the show started. So didn't have time to swing by the condo that they had to set up for the comics. Went straight to the club, kind of got cleaned up and did the show. And then afterwards, she said, here's the keys to the condo. It's right at the street. You can't miss it. I couldn't find it. I mean, I've been driving around for 2 hours, could not find this thing. I didn't want to start putting keys in just random people's doors. I couldn't
Right.
find the apartment complex this condo was in, nothing.
Yeah.
And I was just exasperated. I called the club. The owner had left. Manager is gone. the other comics were staying at a hotel. I was the only one staying at the condo. So eventually I saw a police car go by, and I thought, oh, he'll know where this address is. This is before GPS and all this stuff like we have on our phone. This is
Yeah.
93 or 4. And so I followed this cop down the side road and started flipping my high beams at him and screaming out the window, hey, pull over. And he pulls over and he's like, stay in the car. He gets out and shakes me down. He's like, what's going on here? I'm like, oh man, nothing. I'm just trying to find this address that, I can't find. He's like, you pulled me over to find this address? I'm like, yeah. I said, I don't know where I'm at. He's like, dude. He goes, what is this address? I said, I'm a comedian working at the Funny Bone. He goes, really? I love comedy. I said, well, I'm not trying to bribe you or anything, but I can get free tickets for if you want to come out and see the show Sunday night. So he came out to the show Sunday night, and I thought, how can I turn what I did with him into a story to make him laugh? And that's where I kind of flipped the whole thing around and put a little Barney Fife into it eventually to have some fun with it. But that was most of my jokes have an origin in truth, and then I just try to find a way to make them the most fun for the audience.
Rik, that was a great bribe.
Yeah.
Great job, dude. And well, I got a chance to see part of your dry bar comedy special you did out in Provo, Utah. I've heard nothing but great things about the folks out there. What was it like getting the opportunity to do that?
It was another one of those things where I'd heard about that long time ago. Keith Barroney, a guy, he's a comedian and he books different things. He had told me that probably a year before they even started, that they were going to do this taping. You'd get some money for doing the show, like a regular show, and then you get part of the royalties from doing this taping and all this kind of thing. And at the time, I think I must have just done a taping to where I didn't think I needed a new tape or wasn't ready for one yet or didn't have different enough material. And then nothing happened for a year. The whole idea he had, it just never showed up. And then slowly, when YouTube started getting going, started seeing these dry bar comedy things. I'm like, oh, that's what Keith was talking about. And so I kept watching, and I saw how well they were starting to kind of figure out how to get the plays and the views going on not only Facebook but YouTube. And again, I was thinking, well, maybe it's played out, because I think when I did mine, it already seemed like 100 comics that had done it. I thought, well, they just don't need another average dude from Tennessee to pop up there and do a show. But I said, well, let's go see what happens. And sure enough, like you said, the crowd is just phenomenal. They've been taught to be appreciative of clean comedy. They mostly want clean comedy. The comics I worked with, my particular night, had a couple of jokes that were blue, and the crowd still laughed at it, but didn't get into the special. But it's Utah. They pretty much want right down the middle, funny stuff. And there's a few things that they don't want. They don't want you to make fun of your wife. They don't want you to make fun of a few things. But if you can, shrug those off and do your set without those kinds of jokes, the crowd's right there with you the whole time. So I think it's a good experience. My only really thought on it is a lot of comics, I think, have done it too early. They don't really have a full show yet. They've got 5 or 6 minutes, and they get up there and they try to stretch, and you can kind of see it on the video sometimes. So I think it's great to do if you've got more than enough time to do it. But if you have barely enough time to do it, I'd probably wait it out and come back and do it when you can be really strong at it.
Yeah. I tell you, like I said, I've heard nothing but great things about the atmosphere out there. The people there, they come ready to laugh. They treat all the comics like royalty, the whole 9 yards. And yeah, you got to be careful. And I think Corey Rodriguez told me that he was telling a joke once about being in his apartment with his girlfriend. I think it was a matter of she was upstairs, he was downstairs. But anyway, as he's telling the joke, someone in the audience screamed out, "He's talking about his wife." So there are some things out there that are a little bit different, but look, it's all fun, all well and good, solid people out there in Provo, and I actually hope that I'll get an opportunity one of these days in the near future. They are so backed up right now with, the pandemic now adding to the fact that they were kind of backed up anyway. So I don't know if I'll ever get a chance anytime soon, but we'll see.
I hope you do. That the editing of those things takes so long. You can record it in real time, but the editing, I've edited some smaller projects on my own, and I can tell you, man, it takes 100 times longer to edit something than it does to shoot it. Even if you have a great set, you've got all the different angles and cuts, and they've got I bet Dry Bar has 30 microphones over top the crowd, so they can isolate different ones. And if somebody coughs, they can take that one out. And there's just a million things going on. So hopefully they get the editing to catch up a little bit with the shooting, and you get your shot here before it's too late. I don't see it going anywhere. Like, it's not going to disappear. I think they found a formula that works for the long haul. So my guess is you'll get on there, just maybe a little bit down the road, hopefully sooner than later.
Rick, I found out about you through your podcast, School of Laughs, and I've listened to it over the years, over the past 5 years or so. I've always, listened to the show. You have great guests. You have great comedic insight to help comics out, and just great advice, great interviews. But for those that don't know, tell the audience a little bit about School of Laughs.
Yeah, so when I moved to Nashville, I moved here in 1999 and was working at the comedy club here. And after about 2 or 3 months, Brian, who ran the club, said, "Hey, man, can you teach a comedy class?" And I'm like, "I don't know how you teach people to be funny." And he's like, "Why don't you watch your own show?" Back then it was VHS tapes. He goes, "Watch it and then hit pause when somebody laughs and then write down why they laughed and then teach people that." I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I guess you can teach the techniques and the structure and the editing."
Yeah.
And basically he had a lot of people that were filthy and also just didn't know how to write a joke. So if you come to the show wanting some humor and the comics up there swearing and not getting to a punchline, people were walking out of the club basically watching these open micers. So eventually I put the class together, and then they became kind of popular because not too many people were teaching classes back then. And I had people driving down from Ohio, driving up from Alabama. One guy was flying in from Texas to take these classes. I'm like, wait a second, that's way too much money to spend on a class. Why don't I just put them online so people can take them online? They don't have to travel all the way to get here. So I started doing that. And then I mentioned in one class, I wish I could do a podcast to let more people know about, how to go about doing comedy, because maybe they can't afford to take a class, but they wouldn't mind having a little bit of information, kind of like a green room for people that don't have a comedy club to go to, or just somebody that's kind of kicking the tires on comedy. So have the classes, started the podcast to let people know about the live ones and the ones online. And I guess the podcast did start in about 2014, so it's been around for a little over 6 years now or so. I think we're coming up on year number 7 here in June. So if you don't have the cash or don't have the interest in taking an online class, you can go through the podcasting and pretty much get all the information that I teach in the sessions, just kind of spread out over 234 episodes. Or if you really want to get into it and figure out what comedy is all about, I've got an online writing class. I've got one that's dedicated just for speakers, teachers, trainers, and preachers called the Master Laughter class, where I teach you how to take comedy and put it into your sermons, your programs, your motivational speeches. Even salespeople take it so they can put comedy into their sales presentations. Toastmasters folks take it. Then I've got a business class for people that, some people take that class first. Like, what goes into being a comedian? So they take that class, and it's a real eye-opener. And from that, they can decide if they even want to take a writing class to get going or not. But all of those things are available on schooloflaughs.com. And I do have a beginning intro to stand-up comedy writing class coming up at the end of April into May. And that just became open for enrollment a couple of days ago. So that's the next one up on the schedule. Then hopefully by August, we can have some live classes again here in Nashville.
Yeah, you mentioned that even in sermons, you can help some of these pastors out. And church is different in 2021, though. Speaking of sermons and churches are different in 2021, Rick. You remember back in the day, Rick, when pastors used to dress in 3-piece suits? I mean, just a full suit, make look like they were dressed like $1 million, man. Or they'd wear a robe or something with a tie or something on. Now pastors are they wearing throwback Chuck Taylors and a brand new pair of jeans with the knees torn out, hoodies. I don't know whether to call them pastor or dude.
Yeah.
But it's go ahead, Rick.
Well, I've heard different pastors talk about that, and the kind of comment that was similar throughout most of the conversations was, we always think about what church was when we grew up, but if Jesus was here today, what would church look like? And, Jesus walked around pretty plain clothes in a robe, sandals, as we see, and just kind of wasn't of the world, but he was dressed as the people of the world, and that made them a little more likely to come up and speak to him and listen to him. So I think that's kind of the approach a lot of pastors have now, is to not dress to impress, but to dress to make the others around them comfortable. It does take even because I grew up with what you're saying, the three-piece suit and the can of hairspray to keep everything in place. Like there was going to be a hurricane in the middle of the sermon somehow. I mean, everything was just like locked down on top of the pastor's head. But it's different, I think I don't know. There's a lot of things different about the church now for sure. But any church that can get people in the doors, whether it's dressing a little more casual, or dressing up, whatever it is, I kind of miss dressing up a little bit, to be honest with you. But with two kids, it's a little bit easier for me to say, hey, let's just go as you are.
Yeah, and I'm just kidding, Rick. I mean, it's fine. It doesn't matter how they're dressed, but it is interesting the difference how we've kind of evolved from what it used to be to where we are now, and it's not a big deal. I do find it humorous and kind of funny the way that some of these guys do look. But look, as long as you're preaching the word of God and everybody understands how to find Christ, that's the only thing that matters. Just joking around. If anybody's out, I hope no one got offended or anything. I'm just kidding around. But so as I say that, Rick, I'd like to transition over to your Men of Mayberry series, man, where you're doing your Don Knotts impression. Tell us a little bit about the Men of Mayberry.
Well, I'm a big Mayberry fan. Like I said earlier, I do a joke on stage where I act like Barney Fife a little bit, make the face and have a little fun with the voice and all that. And over time, I just get to be bigger and bigger fan of the show. This past year, one of the great things about the pandemic was I was able to do a movie called The Mayberry Man, which is scheduled to be released sometime in the fall, hopefully. I think the picture's locked, which means they've got everything in place. Now they're just doing color correction and adding some stuff, sound and different things in spots. But while I was doing that, I had a lot of fun, got to meet a lot of other people that loved the Andy Griffith Show. When I got back from that, I felt like, man, what else can I do with Mayberry? So I started doing some paintings. And
Okay.
I got this series where I'm trying to paint all the men that were on the Andy Griffith Show. So if you don't mind, I'll pull up a few so that I can share them with everybody.
Oh, please do. Please do.
Let's see if I can get this thing here to work. All right, so
That's
right
my man Goober and Gomer.
That's right. Those are a couple of my favorite guys on the show. And then we've got Barney and Andy.
Yeah.
We got Opie, and then I'm still kind of working on the guy in purple here, which
is that Howard Sprague?
Name. What's that?
Is that Howard Sprague?
Yeah, Howard Sprague. I got to tone him down a little bit. He looks a little bit angry there. I got to put a smile in that face somewhere in his cheeks. And then we've got Floyd and, of course, Otis.
Yeah. You got to love Otis. I forgot about Otis, man. Yeah, and Floyd, of course. Floyd was he was really funny. Floyd was a weird dude, man, but funny as heck.
Yeah, I like all of them. So I'm just trying to have some fun with the painting, and that's another thing I had a little more time to do during the pandemic is just relax a little bit. I wasn't had more nights at home, so once the kids were being put to bed and all that, I would go up in the bonus room and just kind of start painting a little bit. So hopefully I'll get these out, maybe make some posters or some T-shirts or have something fun with it for people that like the Andy Griffith Show too. But just having a lot of fun. Just trying to.
Yeah, I love it, man. Those are some good paintings there, Rick. You did a really good job. Very good.
Thanks. It's one of those classes I took in college. My very last semester, I had like an elective class that I could burn. I'd already kind of passed the oral exams and everything. So I would say coasting is probably the right word. So I'm like, I'll take art, man. That'll be easy. And it wasn't easy, but I loved it. We had to do 4 paintings in the class. We had to do a landscape and a self-portrait and an abstract and still life. So you only had to do 4 to pass the class. I ended up painting 23 paintings like in 8 weeks. I just loved it so much. And the art instructor was really cool and would help me get some paint. I was broke as could be. So I was painting on the back of, broken wood signs I found on the side of the road. Whatever I could paint on, I was painting. And then I just didn't really have time to do it until this past year. So I'm having fun getting back into it.
It looks good. It really looks good. Are you familiar with the director, Christopher Sean Shaw?
Yeah, I've never, I think, hung out with him, but I've met him before at a CCA, Christian Comedy Association conference quite a while back.
So he has a film called Church People that came out last weekend in selected theaters. It is now on the virtual platform. You can, good gosh, it's available now on the virtual platform. And I think it's at churchpeople.com for anyone that's looking for it. But we were talking about pastors at church because church is funny. I think church people are very, very humorous. I had a friend of mine ask me not too long ago, Maurice, can I be on the prayer team? And I said, sure, you can be on the prayer team. Matter of fact, I'm going through some stuff. Could you pray for me? And he said, you know what? I got something better. B6 vitamins. What? Yeah, no. B6 vitamins. They just kind of calm you down. And I said, note to self, make sure this guy doesn't come within 10 feet of prayer team.
Right. Yeah, he's got a little
And then,
multi-level marketing going on, doesn't he?
well, and then I go down to GNC and I start asking the guy behind the counter, where are your B6 vitamins? Note to self, make sure to kick myself off prayer team. We just need Jesus, Rick.
Right.
We need Jesus, man. Anyway, so Rick, we're always working on material and trying different things. Do you go to open mics to work on your material?
Yeah, during normal times, I would sneak out once in a while and hit an open mic. I have like we mentioned the Huckabee show earlier. I warm up the audience twice a month on that show, so I use that kind of as a paid open mic. I still do some material that I know is going to get them going, but I always try a couple of new minutes out every time I approach that, and that gives me a goal to write each week a couple of minutes, so that when I get those chances, I get a place to try them out. So that's more of the place where I work on material now, because it's more in my time frame of being awake and alert. Some of the open mics, hit pretty late, and the audience, for what I'm doing, I know if I get a laugh in some of the open mics I go to, that it's going to work anywhere because they're really tough. But a lot of them don't start till 10 or 11. I've got a family. I like to be home. So I do work out the jokes, but most of the time I work them out at the Huckabee show when I'm warming the crowd up.
Yeah, I was talking to Bob Stromberg earlier, who was on at noon on the show, and he kind of does the same thing. He'll get into 25 or 40-minute set, however long it is, at a paid show, and he'll sneak in about 5 minutes of new material and see how it goes. And he just that's how he works on his new stuff. I go to a lot of open mics in Washington, D.C., and I mean, I'm usually the only clean guy there. But it is a great way to work on new stuff because there are a ton of open mics in the city. However, it just depends. And like you said, you don't want to be out all night either. But if you can get in there and work on it, you can. And if you can suffer, the language, because I think you mentioned this a little bit earlier. You get guys that are open micers, dude, and they are just, oh gosh, the stuff they're talking about, Rick, is unbelievable, dude. And you really feel for you really,
it can be frustrating, and I always, comedy at its best is an art form, and I understand people can express themselves in different ways.
Yeah.
And I can disregard some comments. I get really frustrated when it gets blasphemous and people start taking the Lord's name in vain and some other things they do, and that's when it really puts me over the edge. The other stuff I can just ignore. I know it's part of what the scene is, and I'm there to bring a little bit of light, maybe with the comedy I do for my 5-minute set. But yeah, it can get pretty disgusting, and I'm at the age now where I'm like, I don't even know what that means, but it sounds bad.
Oh no, I can't even decipher half of what the decrepit levels that they're going to now are foreign to me. Like, what? What are these guys doing?
I don't know.
And so, but like I said, we are there as a light, and I try to witness in the way I'm carrying myself through my material. If one wants to know more about me, it might create an opportunity for me to witness. I try not to do too much of that because I don't want to run anybody off. But I do hope that the Lord will use me in some way to lead someone that's in a very dark place. And believe you me, Rick, those kids are in dark places. And maybe the Lord can use me to bring them to Christ. So I've been doing it for a while, and I've developed some friendships. But I do go there to work on new material, and I just wondered on what level other clean comedians or Christian comics actually go to work on that. And like, would you go to an open mic, or for example, do you ever perform in a comedy club?
Oh yeah, yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
okay. Now, when you're at the club, have you ever had to deal with a heckler?
Yeah, it's been a while since I've had to deal with a heckler, but certainly back in all the '90s, I was working 48, 49 weeks a year in comedy clubs. It was just I would take Fourth of July off and Christmas off, maybe Thanksgiving, so it was just nonstop. So it was pretty common back in those days, especially the late shows on Saturday, maybe even more often the late show on Friday because people have been getting up early for work all week and then they're staying out late and they're whooped and the alcohol's kicking in. You get some heckling situations. So you can approach it 100 different ways. My approach was always to first let them know that they're being disruptive in case they didn't know. Second, and that lets the entire crowd know that you're aware of the situation. And then if they act up again, I'm a little more confrontational. And the third time, I try to make a point of letting them know I'm having none of this. And especially if I was, back in the early days hosting a show, I didn't want the heckler to get a head start on the feature act or the headliner. And if I was
Yeah.
the middle act, I would definitely shut them down so the headliner didn't have to deal with it. But they're always just wanting attention. So a lot of times if you just give them a tiny bit and say, okay, that was your 15 seconds of fame. Now we got to get back with the show. You can
Right.
kind of get back into it. But for me, it's always letting the crowd know that I've heard about it. I know how you guys feel about it. You don't want this guy taking over the show, so I'm going to address him. If it takes me more than 2 times to get to him, the bouncer comes over, kicks him out, kicks her out. A lot of times it was women, and it's harder to be direct because people think you're attacking the other person. But you had all kinds of crazy heckling situations back in the day. Now it's a little more rare. I wouldn't say look forward to it, but I don't mind it anymore. I think the last guy that heckled me, we just stopped and prayed for him, so it made him feel really awkward.
That's good. I love it. What about bombing, Rick? What's your worst bombing story?
Well, for us, bombing can mean a lot of different things. If bombing is not getting the reaction that you're used to, then my most recent one was back in March. I think it was March 2nd or 3rd. It was a socially distanced, mask wearing, 8 a.m. corporate event. I wouldn't say necessarily corporate. It was for superintendents of Alabama. It was all the school superintendents. But 8 in the morning, they were in this room that set 6,000 people, and there was about 100 of them. The
Oh,
nearest person to me was probably 75 feet away,
wow.
and most of them sat in the back of the room, even though they
Oh
had
my
all the room to
gosh.
spread out in. And there was just very little reaction at all. And after about 5 minutes, I just told them, I said, hey, I know comedy is weird at 8 in the morning. I know it's weird to be spaced out like this. I know it's weird to be wearing masks, but the weirdest thing for me is just not the engagement from you guys. So I want you to just feel free to loosen up a little bit, forget that we're in a pandemic. And the reason I'm here is so we can relax and have some fun so you're more receptive for the rest of the day for all the stuff we're going to teach you. So let's have a good time. And I just kind of stepped out of my normal act for 30 seconds, made that little public service announcement. Then they came on board. But that first 5 minutes, it was just nothing, just like throwing rocks into a canyon and never hearing it hit the bottom. Where'd that joke go? Where did that joke go?
Yeah. Well, Rick, the when you comedy's got a lot of elements that need to be in place in order for the comic to succeed. Number one, he's got to be funny, of course. Number two, the lighting can make a difference. The acoustics of the room can make a difference, and then the socially distanced crowd. That's not what you want as a comic. You want everybody packed in, and you want them up close to the stage if you can get them up there. You want everybody in there packed good and tight, and you are now set up for a good show. But if, for example, you go and do comedy in a room where people didn't expect a comedy show, like they weren't expecting a comedian, maybe they came to see music or whatever, they're in a bad mood. Like you said, it was early in the morning. They didn't want to be there. They probably were there because they had to be there, and so they didn't come to laugh. Long story short. So you're going uphill.
Yeah, there's a lot of times where the comedian is an afterthought when people plan an event or people, like you say, aren't aware. I used to do a lot of shows back in the early '90s at these Holiday Inns where they would have comedy on a Wednesday. Then you go 2 hours away and do it on a Thursday. Then Friday, Saturday, you're at a club,
Yeah.
and there'd be people in there, just having their happy hour drinks and grabbing the free food they had in the corner, the sausage links and the nacho chips and those things. And all of a sudden, they turn
Yeah.
the lights off and start the comedy show, and they're like, "Wait a second, I was trying to have a conversation with this business person, and all of a sudden, we
Yeah.
have a comedy show going on around me." So there's always those types of situations. I think just the longer you do it, the less it bothers you, the more you find ways to have fun with it. But when you're new, especially if you're a new comic watching or listening to this, you have to have all those experiences so you know how to handle them. So why not just embrace all of it? People ask me all the time, what's the best open mic in Nashville? I get this question every single week from somebody that's taking a class or kicking the tires on taking a class. What's the best open mic? I said, the next one, because you need to go through all of it and learn. There's no shortcut for learning how to get the hard knocks and paying your dues. There can be some streamlining and fast tracking how you write and how you define who you are, but those experiences you have to go through in real time. So get out there and do the next one and learn how to deal with it.
Rik, why do you perform as a clean comedian?
That's just what I'm interested in, and that's what seems to work for me, and that's where I find humor. I've always leaned that way, and I might be too clean of a comedian sometimes for some groups, and I don't apologize for it. But
Amen.
there's a ton of fun stuff in the everyday world. I mean, just before we hopped on this call, I saw that, and you can look it up in your Facebook feed. Krispy Kreme is giving away a free glazed donut to everybody for the rest of the year if they show their vaccination card. I mean,
wow.
If they had done this last year without the vaccination, I would have gotten my type 2 diabetes group, and I would have got my vaccine already for this year. You know what I'm saying? They could have moved me up a couple of months. But there's stuff always going on that you can make fun of and that the crowd needs to laugh about. So, and like we said, we know there's plenty of people doing the other stuff, so why not have some balance with what the crowd can pick and choose from?
So, Rik, you've been around comedy for a while. You have your school of laughs. You give advice on how to be a good comic and how to write better. What is the biggest thing that you have learned about comedy through the years that has made you a better comedian?
I think two things come to mind really quickly. One is spend as much time as you need at the beginning of the set to find the similarities between you and the audience, the reason that they should listen to you, the reason you should speak to them, the things you have in common before you start launching into your extreme point of view that might be different from theirs.
Yeah.
I think when I was in the clubs, my jokes came too fast. I didn't give them time to react as much as I should have. There's a lot of jokes that the laugh would have been bigger if I'd slowed down and just taken a breath, but I was so insistent on getting to the next joke. So I'm a big fan of editing, so your jokes are tight. But I think back in the day, I was trying to get too many jokes into the show and not as concerned with how many jokes they actually get out of the show. So I could have done half as many jokes if they enjoyed it twice as much. It's the same results. But I was just trying to be like the rapid fire guy. That's a couple of little things that come to mind. But also the other thing with comedy is that it's a great tool for a million other things. A comedy show in and of itself is a great thing. People relax, they laugh, they release endorphins, they get all those things. But if you can do comedy and make a difference after the event, whether it's a thought or, if you're a speaker, if it's your 3 key takeaways and those are tied to comedy and it resonates and they remember those things because it was funny and they need those things and they change a habit or a strategy or an approach after you speak, then you're using comedy for even more impact. Same thing goes with pastors in a sermon. Obviously there's things you do and don't joke about when you're in church, but if you have a few moments at the beginning of the sermon where you can lighten things up a little bit, the audience or the congregation is much more likely to listen to what you have to say. So, comedy has a lot of uses. A comedy club is great, but if you can take it somewhere else and help people deal with things, cope with things, and even hear the other side, the other point of view about things, it's an incredible tool.
Yes, it is. When you think about, the nerves and the butterflies that can kick in, and which happens to everybody, and everybody has their own style and process or ritual, whatever you want to call it, to stay calm. How do you deal with the butterflies before you perform, Rik?
Well, if you don't have butterflies, you probably don't care how the show's going to go. So it's a good thing. And there have been times where I didn't really have butterflies. I'm like, wait a second, I'm not as focused as I should be, because if I was focused, I'd be a little not not scared to go on stage, but anxious to get on stage. I want to get up there and try some new jokes out. Or I want to get up there and entertain this. Or I want to take this tough audience and turn them into a good audience for the next comic that follows me. Those kinds of things.
Yeah.
So you do have butterflies, even if you know what you're supposed to be doing. But what I do to kind of calm things down, if maybe I feel my heart racing a little bit, or I'm a little too distracted, or I'm starting to get a little dry mouth backstage, I always drink a half bottle of water right before I walk out, about a minute before I walk out, so I don't choke on it, not spitting when I go outside. But take it that, and then after that, I just take some deep breaths. I always pray ahead of time, say, God, I'm doing comedy because it's a talent you gave me. Let my eyes be open and my ears be listening tonight for opportunities to share your message in some way in this show. If it doesn't happen, that's fine. But if there's an opportunity, help me to notice what it is. Maybe just connect with somebody in the audience where they come up afterwards, like you say, and say, hey man, I kind of noticed you were clean. Are you a Christian? And you can open a conversation that way.
Yeah.
But I always want to bring glory to God with whatever I do. So I pray for that. And I kind of find that if you pray for that and you're prepared for your comedy show, God never lets you down. So whether it's a show where maybe you thought you bombed, if you connected with one person and changed their life around a little bit, that's a great show. But if you're not looking for those opportunities, you're not going to find them, and they probably won't present themselves. So the butterflies to me are just an indication you want to do something. And so I pray and ask God to find out what that is for me to do while I'm out there, whether it's 5 minutes or 30 minutes or an hour.
Yeah. You were talking about, going through the set so fast, which is pretty much brought on by nerves. It's, you got to slow yourself down. And, my wife, who's actually very funny, and I get half of my jokes from her. She's just natural, but she's always told me, she said, slow down and let them enjoy the joke for a second. They like it. Let them laugh. Give them a chance to get it out. And another thing, they want to hear more on that keep talking about that subject until you feel okay, it's time to change. Because and that's a part of just reading the audience. What are they feeling? What are they like? And I've actually learned that over the years as well. And one more thing is being comfortable in silence. Like I've noticed the top comedians, the ones that are raking in all the big bucks, they Dave Chappelle comes to mind, Jerry Seinfeld comes to mind, where they don't have to be getting a reaction all the time. They're comfortable in silence, and that's something that I'm trying to learn as well. Because I think what happens, Rick, and I'd love to hear your response to this. I think what happens to a lot of us as comedians is that if we don't hear enough sound, we start to panic, and we think that we're bombing when in fact we may not be, because we've got the mic and we can drive this thing wherever we want to drive it. And so if we can kind of like have more presence of mind on stage and not allow the audience per se, quote unquote, to dictate my tempo.
Yeah, I've always thought of it, and what you say right there is true. You don't want the audience to dictate the tempo of your set, because you need to be who you are every time you go out on stage. So you need to develop that on your own.
Yeah.
But I think what happens a lot of times is the performance reveals problems with the preparation. So if you don't have well-written material, or you haven't memorized it to where you can forget it and perform it freely and not worry about every single word, but get the beats and the points across, and have your editing down tight where you can take a breath, then you speed through stuff because you're afraid you're going to forget the next thing. So you're on to the next thing, so you don't forget something. When you have the material down and written well and prepared well, your performance it really should be pure joy. You're getting a chance to go out there and deliver something to the audience that you really taking your time to craft, and you're not necessarily proud and cocky about it, but you're confident that this material is what you need to be delivering.
Yeah.
Then I think your timing comes into play a lot easier. You're not worried about slow moments in the show because you're confident about the next thing coming up. And what I find when I've gotten to those points, and I don't always have a show where I've got all those things nailed, but when I do have those things in place, man, I enjoy the show more, and I think of additional lines and taglines and ideas on stage because I can sit there in the moment and listen to the jokes as I tell them, just like the audience is hearing for the first time, instead of racing through them because I know the jokes and I know what's coming next, or I hope I don't forget what's coming next. I can actually deliver it and kind of see myself in that joke, in that environment, and what would I do next? They're laughing here, and before I go on the next thing, is there something else I can add to it? And you get those little ideas that turn a joke into a bit. And those are my favorite pieces to perform, or things that started out as something small, but through performance, I was able to add things because I got that instant notification from the crowd that that's a good thing to add to it, the laugh. So it's, again, a performance will reveal poor preparation as much as good preparation.
Well, there's no doubt about it, and I've noticed that. Uh, I'm at the point. I did a 45-minute set in Baltimore last year before the pandemic, whenever that was. Seems like it's 2 years ago. But
Uh-huh.
I did a 45-minute set in Baltimore, and I actually had never done 45 minutes. And I took the gig, and I was ready to go. And what I did was I had my wife sit in the front with each subject joke idea on cue cards she was holding.
Nice.
And so she was following along from one joke to the next. So if I ever got lost, I could just look at the cue card that she was holding. Well, I never had to look at it. I even forgot she was there with them. I was so into the set.
Yeah.
And
Well, just preparing those cue cards alone was one more way you could help memorize your set. So,
oh yeah,
kudos to you for getting the preparation to where you didn't need them. And that's the point you want to get to. Is my favorite quote. I don't know who came up with it. I wish I could give them credit for it. Was, amateurs prepare until they get it right, and professionals prepare until they can't get it wrong. And so what you had done is you had prepared so you couldn't get it wrong. You'd memorized it, you prepared it. Now you're going to go have fun delivering the jokes.
exactly. And at the end of the day, this is it's tedious work. Being a good comic is tedious. It takes a lot of work and writing and practicing and practicing and practicing. I'll never forget Steve Young talking about preparing for his first Super Bowl win, and I think Mike Shanahan was his offensive coordinator, and they went over it all night long. I mean, he was like maniacal about preparation. He went out there and threw 6 touchdowns, a Super Bowl record, and won his first Super Bowl. But what I'm saying is, anything you want to be really good at, you've got to pour yourself into it and prepare. And and at the end of the day, what is the driving force, Rick? Joy. You said it a moment ago. You got to love it. You got to love this, or you can't do it. There's no way in the world you could stay on that stage and keep trying to make people laugh and failing and not love it, or you won't get back up there. You just won't do it. So I found that to be true. There's a big difference, Rick, between being someone that's funny in the break room at work, being at a dinner party, hanging out with a couple of friends in front of Starbucks, and just killing, in a social situation. Oh my gosh, you're so funny. And people think that you should go up there and you should be a comedian, or you may even get in your mind, I'm pretty funny. Well, there's a big difference between that, and you may be a pretty funny person, but there's a big difference between that and the stage. The stage is a learned skill that takes work.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great if you can make strangers laugh and friends laugh, and that might help you a lot on stage. But if you don't have material ready to go, and that works every time when people don't know who you are, then it's going to be a long journey. But like you said, you have to enjoy doing it. And the great thing about comedy, and I think musicians for the same thing, is you have to want to be able to do it for free at the beginning, because you're not going to get paid for it for a long time. So if you don't enjoy it in the early stages, most people weed themselves out and they don't continue with it, and they just spent however long to discover that, and that's fine. I know more people that have tried comedy and decided not to do it than I do that have stuck with it. I mean, hundreds more, and that's just part of it. But the people who, even when it was going bad, still kind of enjoyed trying to figure it out, those are the people that stuck around. That's me. I started off, I wasn't good at all for a long time, but I just couldn't not try to do it again and do it better. And I just found it fascinating to this day. We talked about the set I did on Huckabee 2 weeks ago. I've thought of 3 taglines that I've got to do since that I wish I could have put in that joke 2 weeks ago. And so it's never done. You're constantly turning joke around going, what else can I add to this? And that's what you do. As a comic, you're constantly trying to take that lump of coal and make a diamond out of it. And then when that one's done, go get another lump of coal and start chipping away.
There you go. There you go. Rik, this has been a great conversation, man. Our 60 minutes has flown right by. But before we get out of here, I'd like to ask you if, and you may have answered this already, but I'm going to throw it out anyway. Are there any words of advice that you can leave with young comedians that are thinking about making this their career?
There's a lot of things I could say. I'm trying to think of what they would listen to.
Okay.
I think it is important that you always joke about what you think is funny, but I think it's important to also consider what the audience may have come to see and find some happy ground in between those two. You're not always, and early on you might rarely be the right comic for the situation, but you should always look in your bag of jokes for the best group of jokes for the people in front of you, because your job is to entertain the people that are there. You can work on new material in every single show if you're crafty about it and slide it in between a couple of bits that are working. So you should always be working on new material. And I think a lot of comics, this one thing I'll say that I think even comics that have done it for a while will agree with and maybe are trying to deal with, is there's a lot of pressure to try to crank out a new hour every single year or to do a new set every single time you're on stage. I'll say that doing a new hour every year is doable if you're a craftsman and you're working on it. But doing a new set every single time on stage, you're never going to have any material that's proven more than once. So don't feel like you have early on, don't have to do a different set every single time. You should be working on new material and trying new things, replacing parts of jokes that didn't work. But if you only try out a new set every single week, you're never going to have a set to perform that anybody can hire you for, because they've never seen you do the same set twice. So take the best of those different sets. Maybe do a different set every time you go out for 3 months, but then come back and take the best of all those sets and start to put together routines and 10 and 15-minute sets that people can see and book you to do, so you can actually get some traction. If they only see you do new material every single time, it's going to be hit and miss, and they're not going to hire somebody that's hit and miss all the time, no matter how creative you are.
Very true. Great commentary, Rik. Great commentary. How can fans follow you on social media or contact you for booking?
You know what? I put together a handy dandy slide for you so I wouldn't mess it up here. So let me see if I can pull this bad boy up here and get it on the screen for us.
Okay.
Move it one more down. There we go. I've got the Facebook page, and you get your regular page on Facebook, and then you've got your professional page. This is where I would love people to go to, Comedian Rik Roberts, so they can keep track of all the events coming up. If you're on Twitter, it's @Rik Roberts. If you like my paintings and stuff, I try to post those kinds of things on Rik Picks Art on Instagram. And then schooloflaughs.com has all the info about the comedy classes, the podcast, and the Master Laughter class, and those kinds of things. So love to connect with people on those, and hopefully stay in touch and see what happens down the road here.
Awesome stuff. Thank you so much, Rik, for stopping by and hanging out on the Maurice Brown Show. It's been great having you on. And folks, if you're watching, please like and share this video. We will be on Roku TV tonight at, probably around 5 p.m. this evening on the Creative Motion Network, the Maurice Brown Show with Rik Roberts. Like I said, if you happen to like this video, like and share, and also subscribe to the Maurice Brown Comedy Channel. Rik Roberts, comedian on the Maurice Brown Show. Rik, thank you so much for being on the show, and may the peace of Christ be with you and your family, Rik.
All right. Thank you very much, Maurice. Really enjoyed it.
Amen.